Okay. So let's start. As I was mentioning a few minutes ago, I'm representing the Open and Agile Smart Cities organization, but also I come from academia originally. So I'm a teacher at the Maia Polytechnic Institute in Maia, Portugal. And I'm also collaborating with the Open and Agile Smart Cities. Maybe you heard of it. So it's an international-wide organization that intends to promote and help cities to become more and more open and agile, as its name says. Okay, so I will be talking about my experience, my team's experience within this ODALA project. For instance, Michael Mulkin is also here, also a colleague who collaborated in this tentative capture of key innovation learnings in EU projects. And that's a very important issue in any project, in any research project, but particularly in CEF projects or Connected Europe Facility projects, which are very much focused on technical innovations that address the smart cities that are getting more and more, that are growing more and more in the world. And of course, the overpopulation of cities needs some kind of answer, some kind of response to be able to be the home of many more people in the same place. So cities have to be smarter, have to have better conditions for everyone to get their information, to live, to work, to have a overall good experience with the cities where people are at. So starting by a brief description of the ODALA project, if you have crossed with this explanation of the project. So it was intended to be collaborative, secure, and replicable open source data lakes for smart cities. Of course, during the project, there were some changes. So the project, sorry, let me just try to, should be able to take the sound. Someone is with the mic on. Could you turn your mic off, please? Sorry. I guess too fast compared to what I intended. I noticed also that there are other participants in the room. So I would ask you to go to the chat to fill the small survey to know the audience today. So I'm hearing my echo, but I can seem to mute some of the participants. Could you please mute yourself? I'm seeing. Okay, now, yeah. Now it's working. And I've been inadvertently moving on the presentation faster. Sorry about that. So the project has been going on for almost 3 years. It has just ended very recently after an extension. And during these 3 years, there were many evolutions, namely in what concerns the priorities in Europe. And so the initial focus of the project was on data lakes, as the name intended, as the name of the project was meant. But then this was changed to data spaces through time. So for today, this is the agenda. We will be focusing on capturing innovation learnings in EU projects, but mostly we will focus on project management innovation, because through the development of the project, we found that this is an understudied and still very poor and poor explored issue and information about project managed innovation from European projects and from research projects in general. I mean, research projects, collaboration projects are very innovative from the technical perspective, but usually the project management innovations aren't very well addressed and registered, so that we can all learn from previous projects. And so I will add this project management expression to the title of the presentation today, in order to be able for future projects to be better than older ones. And this is a brief agenda of today. So starting from a brief description of the ODALA project and specifically the work package innovation management that we worked on. Then we will go through qualitative methodologies, such as individual and group interviews. For those of you who are not acquainted with this, focus group is a group interview, an interview with more people. It's only that. Then, building on the qualitative results, the development of a qualitative methodology, such as a survey, will enable anyone to delve more in detail for specific aspects that were already gathered in the initial qualitative approach. So the initial qualitative approach is intended to have to diverge in what concerns information. So we want to collect diverse, complex, varied information, rich information in the words of the respondents. So that's why we use individual and group interviews, so that in the actual words that people answer to the questions, we can understand what are they talking about, or we can try to understand, of course. So there's always some subjective analysis to this, but the richness of qualitative methodologies is exactly that, is to capture complex information, but at the same time subjective, that needs debate. And that's why we built this team of experts addressing this innovation and all this data collection, the interviews, its analysis, their analysis, and then from the interviews, develop better surveys addressing more specific questions that we want to understand by a broader sample, and bigger sample. Okay. Finally, we will have some minutes for debate or questions or any clarification that you intend to. Okay, so for the ones who are not or maybe not acquainted with the ODALA project, or the difference between data lakes and data spaces. So as I was mentioning, the ODALA project started by focusing on data lakes. So that was the state of the art in 2019 and 2020 when the project was submitted. So having a centralized repository to allow any city to store all its data in the same place, either static or streamed, structured or unstructured, and at any scale. So of course we are focusing on smart cities. So that would be a centralized approach. In the meantime, from 2020 on, Europe changed a little bit its focus. So data spaces became more and more important. So to have this different architecture, so different spaces, not as centralized as a data lake. So having a data ecosystem which is defined by a sector or application. So this centralized infrastructure has other advantages, of course, such as trustworthy data sharing with common agreed capabilities. This was the project participants and project stakeholders and partners. So as a Connected Europe Facility project, it has this structure of a front-runner city, which was Kiel, which was supposed to implement some use cases. And then it was followed by the follower cities, which were Cartagena in Spain, Saint-Quentin in France, Heidelberg in Germany, the region of Flanders in Belgium, and Arezzo in Italy. So, of course, with the support of all the technical partners, organizations such as OASC, and research institutes such as IMEC and so on. So, as I mentioned, ODALA tried to improve data management in cities through these data science institutes, public open data, and tried to build a better infrastructure for people, for companies, for organizations in general. Of course, to enable cities to have and manage real-time data and historical data for cities to become more and more, or be more and more evolved, adapted to current days and current needs of the population. To leverage existing building blocks, especially the Connected Europe Facility Context Broker, and of course to enable automated identification and reuse of legacy city data and provide open source software in order to work in real time. So those were the objectives of the project. Of course, with other, okay, nice to meet you, Manny. With other objectives of the project, of course, build on other European projects that were going on, and of course, the European strategy to create this sustainability model, of course, to build on prior experience and think about best practices. And that was the motto of the innovation management approach. Of course, to gather the best practices and then to be able to share these best practices with companies, with organizations, with research institutions, and of course, with everyone in Europe, everyone in the European Union. Of course, with the objective of reducing costs, saving time, and facilitating implementation. And in the end, develop success stories. So with the experience gathered from every pilot site and every experience to be sustainable, as I mentioned before. The plan was then starting from communication through every media possible and address specific audiences and disseminate the experience gathered either through the scientific community or the public sector and others that could take advantage of the knowledge obtained. Okay, so in terms of technical knowledge, the ODALA project was very innovative, technical innovation. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the project management, the learnings, the experience, what went well, what could be improved if we started this again or in future projects, that would be important. And that's why we approached the innovation management using this combination of mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative approach. And the project had several interest groups, several interest parties, such as the users, of course, namely public administrations that will use the architecture that will be provided, facilitators, influencers, of course, they are very important currently, citizens, of course, are the end users. Citizens and companies are the end users that we want to address and to improve their perspective using the city, any city, of course, either the front runner or the follower cities in this project. So in what concerns specifically the innovation management work package, it was meant to reply to many aspects. Some of them I already mentioned, of course, the technical aspects that we wanted this project to be innovative in, and it did, as I mentioned, but also the governance ones, the project management ones, that the difficulties that people faced, and perhaps in future projects shouldn't be facing. Why should we commit the same mistakes that others did in the past? So we should learn from these difficulties, these governance aspects, these administration aspects related to the funding agency also. So we try to capture this innovation using this mixed methodology, as I mentioned, of course, to replicate and to adapt this concept, in particular to the follower cities that still had some time to implement some of this knowledge after the implementation in the front runner city in Kiel, but also, of course, after the project ends, for other cities, for other projects, for other partners to learn from ODALA's mistakes, to learn from ODALA's knowledge, everything that was that went well also. So that's the idea. So starting from the qualitative methodologies, we used both individual and group interviews, as I mentioned, but we started by individual interviews to the frontrunner city and its technical partners that were implementing the use cases in Kiel, so the frontrunner city of ODALA. As I briefly mentioned before, this was meant to gather the opinion of these stakeholders, city stakeholders or technical partners, exactly in their words. So how did these interviewees experience? What problems did they have? What went well? What could be improved next? So in their actual words, because sometimes people are talking about any subject in their own words, and they use synonyms to other concepts, to other terms, and we want to understand what do they mean by these synonyms. Are they actually talking about that other concept that we know, that we all know, or do they mean something else? So the richness of qualitative methodologies is to actually be able to capture people's own words and try to interpret what are they talking about. So first, to understand the technical aspects, what has been adopted by the front-runner city, why were these solutions chosen, and so on, what challenges, of course. Capture this in-depth understanding of the real implementations of the use cases. So how was the interaction between stakeholders? What needs did each one have? Which were answered, which were addressed, and which were not? So trying to improve every time. And as I mentioned, the interviews had that objective to capture people's own words using semi-structured questions, questions that allow flexibility for the interviewer to lead the talk. So it's not a standardized questionnaire with no possibility of changing this protocol, but the open-ended questions allow the interviewer to be flexible enough to actually talk. It's a two-way talk with the interviewee. So these were the questions. We have actually five, with the socio-demographic questions, but the questions that we want to capture from the interviewees were divided in 4 sections. A first section addressing general question that would enable to have a broad overview, if possible, if the interviewees would be able to talk on their own about how was his or her personal perspective of the project. This could be only one question. That's why open-ended questions are good. So if we have an interviewee who likes to speak and who can actually lead the talk, it's perfect. So they use their own words, and the interviewer doesn't influence or bias the interviewee's opinion, asking something else or changing their mind by introducing a different issue. So it's perfect when an interviewee is able to go through the issues, the aspects we want together, only by answering this broad question. And it was addressed to all the stakeholders, either city participants or organizations, technical partners, and so on. So these general questions were addressed to all the partners, all kinds of partners. But of course, not everyone likes or follows the path that we, as the innovation management team, meant them to follow. So talking about all aspects that we found important. So we had some backup or more closed questions in order for people to address, for us as interviewers, to guide the interview to the actual more important aspects that we wanted. So whenever needed, we had these follow-up questions in order to lead the interview where we wanted it to go. But as I mentioned, if the interviewee would be able to go through these aspects that we wanted, we would need to intervene, to add another question, and to maybe create some noise in the conversation, in in the interviewee's reason or thinking. Yes, you understand what I'm saying. So with qualitative methodologies, we want to capture the interviewee's opinion, but with the least possible influence by us interviewers. Okay, we want to be genuine. They're what's in their mind actually, with the least possible influence. But of course, we want to capture some information, relevant information, so we went through these aspects. Now, section 2 was addressed at the more technical partners, or specifically at the technical partners, because we wanted specific information such as their role, either their organization's role or their individual role in the technical development. How was the actual implementation? So technical aspects that only the technical partners would be able to give us. Then section 3 was about experience. So having a broad perspective of the participants, here more focused on general aspects such as project management, such as organizational aspects, collaboration aspects with the partners. So positive, negative aspects that people would like to stress, to make known, but also possible suggestions for future implementations. At the time, they could be implemented also in the follower cities implementation. Section 4 was addressed at the value and future plans of the project, namely after the end of the project. So what value did the partners intend to have, either to monetize their technical results, intellectual property, business models, and so on. So all these interviews took around 45 minutes, so that they were complex interviews with all this information that we want to gather. But as I mentioned, enabled us to capture the actual words of the interviewees. So trying to understand what are they thinking about this, because it's very complex to get what are people thinking about the collaboration with the partners, the technical implementation, the difficulties, what went well, what could be improved. And so we used all these results to improve other interviews that we did. This time, group interviews or focus groups, as I mentioned before. So here we have many people in a room, and we may collect more opinions at the same time. Researchers say that focus groups enable to capture more innovation items when compared to individual interviews to the same amount of people. So if you do a focus group with 10 people, you will probably get more insights and innovation learnings when compared to doing 10 individual interviews. But of course, they all have advantages and disadvantages. And focus groups, when one interview answers, the other participants will all be influenced by the first interviewee answer. So that also comes with any, of course, some disadvantages. But building on the individual interviews, we, among other experiences, we performed a focus group in a partner consortium meeting in January 2023. But very important, before presenting them the interviews analysis. So in order not to bias, to influence their opinion, I only posed 3 questions in this focus group that will come in a minute. Of course, to confirm what was said in the interviews, but also as a group interview to capture more combined and agreed information. And the questions were these 3 of the section 3 of experience of the individual interviews I showed you before. So what were the positive aspects of the participation in the project, and the negative ones, and also further suggestions that people might have? Of course, here the dynamic is a little bit different, so we have to manage the room. So when someone is speaking, enable everyone to speak, try to motivate everyone to be participant. From these individual and group interviews, we were able to analyze them, all this information, all this qualitative, rich, diverse, complex information, as I mentioned before. Sorry. So NVivo is a software that enables us to analyze this complex kind of information and following exploratory content analysis, trying to get a group of categories that mean that synthesize what people are talking about. So categories or small expressions, small words that synthesize what people were talking about. So instead of looking at a full interview with many pages of opinions, of words, of expressions, we, using NVivo, have to find the best expressions or small expressions that synthesize what people are talking about and organize these expressions or categories in a meaningful and representative way. So from all these qualitative methodologies, we contacted all these partners, either technical ones or city stakeholders, gender division, and also age addressing between 30s and 60s. Just to give you an example of what NVivo may provide you, we can see here, for instance, regarding the MIMs, the minimal interoperability mechanisms, which are proposed by OASC. By the way, if you didn't have the opportunity, you should go and search for it. My colleague Michael addressed a webinar on Monday exactly about the MIMs. So how can they help in a city, or a city to be smarter? And from the interviews and the focus groups, people were talking about expressions, concepts that relate to the MIMs, that are related to the MIMs, and using NVivo, we were able to organize all this in these categories, and we used each of the MIM together when people were talking about the concept that could be associated with each of the MIM. So in NVivo, we get this tree-like organized tree-like structure. So a high-level category, all the memes, all the 7 memes. There are 7 memes. Whenever people talked about the Gaia X architecture, this could be addressed at all the memes. So 3 people mentioned the Gaia X architecture, and so it was coded as all the memes. In what concerns meme 1 or context, these are the amount of this is the amount of persons that mention each aspect and how many times was this aspect mentioned. So the references is how many times was meme 1 was mentioned 24 times by all 6 of the interviews who mentioned meme 1. So whenever people mentioned 3rd generation of fireware architectures, they were talking something related with context of information, meme 1. The same thing about the compatible context brokers that were used in the project, such as Scorpio or ODALA. And so NVivo provides us this organized tree-like structure. So this is a subcategory of compatible context brokers, central point to exchange data. So we can see what's more important in the words of the persons and how these expressions synthesize what people were talking about. So here we try to infer that people, when people talking about the 3rd generation of fireware architectures or the compatible context brokers, they were actually talking about very close concept of meme 1 and so on. I won't go through this structure in detail because it's not the focus of the webinar today. This was only meant to give you an overview what NVivo provides us to do. So gathering what people mentioned related with meme 2 was again the 3rd generation of fireware architectures, as also was mentioned in meme 1, as you've seen before, and subcategories. So also air and water quality had 3 subcategories. Whenever the partners needed to translate data from Dutch to English, when they created the Flemish knowledge graph, and the need to publish interoperable data. So this was all related with the air and water quality use case done in the Flanders. And this relates with meme 2 or data models. So this is the structure of NVivo. The other memes are here. And then the actual most relevant results from the individual interviews and group interviews, so of all the qualitative methodologies, were, for instance, that it is very important to build a team with the right partners, but especially committed partners, so that they are committed with the project and they answer in time, so that they provide information whenever it is needed, but that they also have clear roles and they have clear roles. So everyone knows what to do and when to do. That is very important. But also it is important that these partners are able to make decisions. Okay, that they don't have to talk with their CEO or with their boss, with someone else. So it's very important that the partners that are collaborating in a project are able to take decisions. in real time. And of course, that they have autonomy in what they do. So they have access to data. They are able to implement data collection. They are autonomous, or they have autonomy in what concerns the tool of development. So they won't subcontract another company to do the work for them, because this would take more time and more entropy in the process. So that's what we found in this category. We call it team category, but it was very, very complex because it dealt with having the right partners, but committed ones, with clear roles, so everyone knows what to do, decision makers, and also that they use the same definitions for key terms, so that they talk the same language, or else someone is talking about A, but other ones usually talk about B. They don't understand each other. Only after some meetings, after some time lost, they understand that A and B are the same. So this is also a very interesting contribution that we found. And here I can briefly show you some of the literal comments of the participants that enabled us to code and create this category team in a research project. So people, one interviewee mentioned that this was a surprise for me, that things are expected not to work as planned in a project. So everyone is expecting that the project will be delayed, and that there will be some problems in the beginning, and that there will be some poor understandings, and the language and terms that are used wrongly. So people are expecting this, at least in the beginning, these complex conversations and understanding each other, and it shouldn't be that way. So that's why this could be bring some innovation here. So other citations that enabled us to create this category regarding a complex team, committed partners, and so on. Another category which synthesized many of the opinions was that the tech partners, if you recall, the tech partners participated in the very beginning of the project in the front-runner city in Kiel, implementing solutions, the use cases, and so after a while they didn't have any feedback, so they didn't know if the solutions they implemented, they programmed, they put in place in Kiel were being used in the follower cities. Were the follower cities having problems implementing or re-implementing those solutions? So that's another aspect that many people mentioned. So that it is important that there is dialogue, that there is information exchange with all the partners, so that, namely in this CEF organization project, so Connected Europe Facility projects, follower cities that will implement some of the use cases towards the end of the project, provide feedback or retroactive feedback to the technical partners. How are implementations going on? What is happening? Do they have difficulties or not? So this is related with the reusability of the developed models. So it only makes sense for a CEF project that the models developed and applied in the front-runner city are also applied in one or more of the follower cities. So that's the right structure. And this brings to a communication issue. So there's no feedback, and there should be. And finally, in these most relevant results, most interviewees mentioned that from a technical project, such as a CEF project, it is very important to provide a tailor-made service to Celta cities. And this brings us again to the sustainability aspect, so that after the end of the project, the technical results are innovative enough to be re-implemented, to be sold, to be adapted. Of course, the solutions that were implemented in the cities are done, so they don't need to be changed. But whenever another city wants to do something different and wants to adapt to their own needs, the technical partners should be able to adapt the solutions implemented during the project. And of course, they are organizations, they are economic organizations, so they need to live on their work. And so, okay, they will adapt this to the cities and sell them to the cities. So this brings sustainability to the technical partners, but also to all the research projects that are going on. Here again, also the literal words of what people were talking about, which we synthesized as it's important to be able to make a tailor-made service to self-service, to cities, to adapt to the city's needs. Not the software as a service for everyone, which will be easily implemented to everyone, but adapted and easily adapted to every city's needs. Okay, so this closes the qualitative results that we had from the individual and group interviews, in order, as I mentioned before, to do a very good survey focused on very specific questions, so that from the broad and open questions in the qualitative approach, in the survey, we wanted to focus very much on concrete aspects that were created and finalized after analyzing the qualitative data. So this was done because it's important in a survey to create the survey items, that is the questions and the answers in a survey, from a specific domain. So to do it correctly, we should build on a concrete knowledge, namely from the qualitative, the prior qualitative analysis. And so building on this analysis, we created closed questions of 5-point Likert scale answers, divided into 2 dimensions. One addressing the importance, and the other the performance of the closed questions, in order to compare the importance and performance of the several items. The items were these ones, divided into part 1, addressing in a CEF project, it is important to, and people would answer between 1 and 5. And then part 2 would have the same exact questions, but addressing in the current CEF project, on and on. So people would answer between 1, strongly disagree, and 5, strongly agree with each of the aspects. Of course, there was the option no answer when people didn't have an opinion or didn't want to express an opinion. So these were the items: collaboration with technical partners, with the funding agency, with the city stakeholders, interaction of the follower cities with the technical partners. Recall that category I mentioned in the qualitative analysis regarding the feedback to the technical partners. So some of these questions address this. So how is the interaction? How is the feedback? So how do stakeholders interact with each other? Sufficient financial funds from the funding agency, technical know-how, collaboration in general. Regarding the team, recall the team aspects. So are they the right partners, committed? So part one of the survey was how important is to have a team of the right partners, for instance. So people answered, it is very important or not important. Whilst in part two of the survey regarding the performance of this aspect, the question would be, did the project have a team of the right partners? So the actual partners I had, were they the right ones or not? That's what we wanted to find. So, and so on and so on. Time is moving on, so I will be I will move on here. So we will have time in the results to see the most relevant questions. So similar questions here regarding synergies with other projects, technical results, dissemination, and so on. This survey was replied during last May, by partners of 3 CEF projects: ODALA, Green Mall, and Interstat. So maybe any of you are or were partners of these projects or not. But the sample was this one, so very broad. Here, either in terms of gender, in terms of the organization perspective, in terms of ages, here more and more focused on the 40s, and in terms of country. So these were the countries participating in any of these projects. And so the results of the survey analysis were these ones: an importance performance analysis that enables us to compare how important is each aspect related with the others. And so this importance performance analysis draws here the mean answers of all the questions in what concerns part one of the questionnaire. So these are the mean answers of all the participants in the horizontal axis. On the vertical axis, we can see the mean of everyone answers in terms of performance. These black lines are the overall means of all the important questions. So overall importance questions, people answered 4.33. Overall performance was 4. So in general, importance questions, people consider those items to be more important than their actual performance. But this grid enables us to create an importance performance grid that divides this graphic into 4 quadrants. The upper left quadrant, the upper right quadrant, the lower right quadrant, and the lower left quadrant. So if you are thinking about improving and you don't have the resources to invest in every aspect of those 25 items. So recall, each of these blue circles is one of the questions. In which of these quadrants or which items would you address first in order to try to improve your project or future project? Would you address the items, these 7 items in the lower left quadrant, or the 3 items in the upper left quadrant, or these items in the the upper right quadrant, or finally in the lower right quadrant? That's the last question I would ask you to, or maybe to answer in the survey. So yes, the ones who answered the right lower quadrant are right. So this should be priority, because these are the aspects which are relatively more important than the overall mean. So they are very important, but they still have a low performance, at least in these projects. So whenever these projects are still going on and there's still time, there is still time to improve, we should focus on this aspect. If not, other projects, we should put more money or try to improve these aspects, because the upper right quadrant are the aspects that are having already a good performance, so they don't need very much concern. Let's go into a little bit detail and summarizing the results obtained. So these are the aspects that are already having an overall good performance. So collaboration with technical partners is going apparently well. Remind us that the sample was consisting of 3 CEF projects. So the collaboration whenever needed. It doesn't mean that the feedback was good. That's a different question, okay? But the collaboration was going very well. So it has the highest performance of all. Technical know-how sharing and team of committed partners was also having a good performance. But the lower right quadrant should be the aspects to improve first. So partners with predefined roles are missing. So maybe if we still have time in an ongoing project, we should go and define the roles so that things work better towards the end of the project, okay? Additionally, this merges 2 questions. So if you see, there are 2 items here, it's not a circle, so one is above the other. One is communication support from the funding agency, while the other is having sufficient financial fund also from the funding agency. So the funding agency is here at stake with one of the aspects with very high importance, but with relative low performance still. But of course, people always complain about the money. No, there's always not sufficient. There isn't sufficient money always. Okay, so we always want to have more money to do the project. And also the dissemination communication strategy also has some time, some opportunity to improve. In what concerns the lower left quadrant, it mostly dealt with the team here. So people don't think that these aspects are very much important. Having a team of partners consisting of decision makers and using the same definitions for key terms. So they are not as important as having partners with predefined roles, for instance, in what concerns the partners. We can compare this also. The collaboration with the funding agency is apparently also not important, even though its performance is also low, okay? But it's also not very important in the opinion of the respondents, okay? So this brings us towards the end of the webinar that dealt with capturing key innovation, namely project management innovation learnings in EU projects, and went through qualitative methodologies that were starting and moved on to quantitative methodologies in order to build on the previous ones. So we still have a couple of minutes. We also started a little bit late than we were meant to. So I'm open for questions if you have one, or comments. I've seen that some people already needed to leave, but feel free to pose a question or comment. First of all, thank you for participating, even in the survey. So we had a diverse sample today, either in terms of ages, organizations, and a balanced gender participation. But if not, if you don't have any question or comment, feel free to get in contact in the future if you have any question, and have a nice Friday wherever you are. Bye-bye.